Hello and welcome to India's World. Bangladesh has undergone a violent general election which was boycotted by the main opposition party of the country, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and its allies. The BNP supporters, who are estimated to be about 30% of the total voters, have effectively been disenfranchised by the election boycott. Not a single vote was cast in 157 constituencies, and the lone candidates who had filed their nomination papers were declared elected the day the nominations closed. The Awami League has secured a brute majority of 232 seats in the 300-member parliament. As 8 parliamentary constituencies are going for repoll on January 16th, the Awami League is expected to improve upon the huge tally of seats it has already accumulated. To discuss the continuing crisis and the emerging political situation in Bangladesh, I have with me a very distinguished panel of experts, 2 former High Commissioners to Bangladesh and an eminent journalist who knows Bangladesh intimately. We have with us Ambassador Veena Sikri, an outspoken diplomat, an eminent diplomat of India. She was High Commissioner in Bangladesh from 2003 to 2006. Currently, she is a professor in Bangladesh Studies program of Academy of International Studies at Jamia Millia Islamia. Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarthy, former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs and also a High Commissioner to Bangladesh. He followed Ambassador Veena Sikri in Dhaka. And we have my former editor, Hiranmoy Karlekar, eminent editor, columnist, commentator, author. He is also author of a book called Bangladesh, the Next Afghanistan. There is a question mark at the end of it, right? Yes. Okay, so I welcome all of you to this discussion. Ambassador Veena Sikri, let me begin with you. Now that the general election is over in Bangladesh, is the crisis also over, or is it going to be intensified?
I think the answer to that question lies very much in the hands of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Because I think that in the run-up to the election, they did try every possible means to have full participation. But I think one has to see also the crisis in the context of the political crisis and the wider crisis. And I would like here particularly to draw attention to the fact that the struggle at this time, which is being projected by the BNP, in fact by one of their leaders, even many leaders of BNP, the struggle is really between secular democratic Bangladesh and an Islamist Bangladesh. I think this has come out as the core of the issue, which is being represented in all these various factors. Now, if you just give you one background on this, the Jamaat-e-Islami was not allowed to participate in the election, but that was nothing to do with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Actually, it was in 2008, before those elections, when the then army-backed caretaker government decided through the Election Commission to look into the constitutions of various political parties. And then they found that the constitution of the Jamaat-e-Islami is not in keeping with the constitution of Bangladesh. They have the question of Sharia law, which is not in keeping with the constitution of Bangladesh, and then they have the question of the will of Allah being supreme.
All this has been changed though by...
No, but that's the point. It has not been changed. In 2008, the Jamaat-e-Islami promised to change it. And when it came to the 2013 elections, they found it had not been changed, and that is why they were not allowed to participate in the elections. Now,
but after the High Court judgment, the Jamaat says it has changed its constitution. They've even changed their name. Now it's Bangladesh Jamaat-e-Islami.
No, that change they made even in 2008. But the core aspects of the constitution have not been changed.
But we're going to discuss Jamaat in greater detail.
Why I'm saying is because then Jamaat-e-Islami now sees their future as being on the street and forcing their way back into the political structure, because if they're not in the political mainstream, then how do they ensure their power in Bangladesh? BNP on the other hand...
May I interrupt you there? I mean, they, after all, they've gone in appeal to court. They don't have to go into the streets. The court might look at the constitution and say, now you've made the necessary modifications, you are a national party, you are not an international organization as it was earlier claimed, will of Allah has been replaced by the constitution of Bangladesh, and that you can call. So how can they see their future in the street? They will see their future in parliamentary democracy.
Yes, but then it does mean a significant, if they make those changes, then they really are on the way to conforming with a secular democratic Bangladesh, which is very good if they do make those changes. That is the basic question.
Okay, now let me ask Pinak something. Have the calculations of the Awami League gone wrong? Because I was there a month before elections and Awami Leaguers were saying that if you can ensure 51% voting, then it will be a free and fair election even if BNP doesn't participate. Now it seems only 30% people have voted, although the Election Commission says 40%. And 127 seats have been won by Awami League without contesting. So you have a brute majority of Awami League and the weakest opposition Bangladesh has seen, parliamentary opposition Bangladesh has seen, since its inception. Now, is this going to strengthen democracy in Bangladesh or weaken it?
Do not forget that in the 2008 elections, the Awami League also came back with a brute majority. And that election, in my view, was perhaps one of the fairest that Bangladesh had. Thanks also to the army, which produced one of the most fair, electoral lists.
But it was inclusive.
It was inclusive. Everybody participated, and the Awami League did come back with a brute majority. Of course, there is a difference. This time, of course, the BNP did not participate. But these two strands, these two political tracks in Bangladesh, the one, the secular, as somebody has put it, it is a struggle for the soul of Bangladesh. Whether Bangladesh should be a secular, modern, democratic republic, or it should be an Islamic and Islamist-oriented republic.
Let the people of Bangladesh decide.
Sure.
It cannot be decided by force.
Sure, it cannot be decided by force. But who is using the force? Who is on the streets? Who's instigating violence? It is the BNP with the help of the Jamaat cadres. Now, Jamaat always has trumpeted the fact that it's a moderate mainstream party. Where is the moderation here? I want to know. The democratic space.
You have prevented them from contesting elections.
Nobody has prevented. No, who has prevented them from contesting?
Well,
they had put down. No. I'm sorry. They had put down certain conditions, which were quite, extraordinary. That Hasina should resign. That there should be a neutral caretaker, non-party government, which is no longer there in the constitution.
Constitution was changed by a brute majority.
But don't forget, it was through a Supreme Court decision. Yes. So there are a lot of complexities in this. I agree that the Supreme Court decision did leave some room for a caretaker government.
Next two elections could be held under the caretaker system.
I think there were only 2 elections when the CTG government was in force.
That's right.
Only 96 and 2001. And this is the 10th joint Jatiya Sansad.
Yeah, okay.
So 2 out of 10,
All right. Mr. Karlekar, 35% of the people have not voted. 30%, let's say, BNP supporters, 5% Jamaat. So you have more than 1/3 of Bangladeshis whose consent is not there for this parliament. So what legitimacy does such a parliament have? And if you take 40% figure of the election commission and average it out over 300 constituencies, it comes to about 20% per constituency. So, 1/5 of Bangladesh is legitimizing a government which is secular and which is democratic, which is inclusive.
The question is, under what circumstances the elections took place? It took place in the midst of a wave of murderous violence unleashed by the Jamaat, BNP, etc. So the very fact the elections could be held in such a situation, and the fact that at least 30% of people exercise their franchise is a remarkable achievement. It means a total defeat for the terror tactics of Jamaat and BNP. Yeah. It means a total defeat for all those who wanted to disrupt the elections. And why? There's a very important thing we are overlooking. The violence that you see today started long before the elections. It started in May last year. Why? Because the whole Ganojagaran Mancho and the movement demanding punishment to the war criminals erupted in Bangladesh.
All right.
And today, the violence you see is aimed at foiling the war crimes trial, aimed at foiling the punishment of the war criminals, and therefore, it has nothing to do with elections.
All right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing the emerging situation in Bangladesh after its general election. Ambassador Sikri, in 1996, when a similar situation prevailed, well, not similar, but somewhat similar. Yes. There was a clear goal that the government of Begum Khalida Zia had, that is, modify the constitution, bring in the caretaker system, hold inclusive elections. Yeah. Now, this time around, there are no such technical solutions possible. There is no roadmap ahead of that if you do X number of things, then an inclusive election can be held. So, how will this crisis get resolved? Do you see the two sides talking to each other?
I think it is possible because if Sheikh Hasina's government, her new government, the 10th parliament is constituted, and if she's able to control the violence on the streets and restore law and order in Bangladesh, this is crucial, and I think it should happen because the public disgust with the violence, with the lack of the economic failures, the lack of jobs, you know, the daily workers, they don't have anything to do. So the economy is going down. 40% RMG ready-made garment orders were cancelled in December 2013. So obviously the people, the corporate sector, the business community is quite fed up. They will force a way to bring law and order back, and then Sheikh Hasina must reach out. But equally, Khaleda Zia's party must recognize that the way ahead is through talks. And here, I think we are going to discuss in a subsequent section, but we have to bring in the external influences that have brought in this terrible situation.
But Pinak, let me go back to what all of you have been saying, which is that this is a battle for the soul of Bangladesh, and it's battle between secularists and communal and pro-Pakistan ideology people. Secularists are Awami League, and those who are the repositories of old Pakistan ideology and Islamic forces, BNP and Jamaat. Now, is this an adequate and complex enough description of what's going on in Bangladesh, or is it a simplistic way for us to say, oh, we are a secular country, let's support the secular forces? Because merely saying that I am against Jamaat and therefore I am secular, is that a bona fide secular identity?
I agree with you that it is perhaps a simplistic kind of duality that we are trying to discuss here. It's more complex than that. And I think the BNP has a lot of freedom fighters for that matter.
Exactly.
But Jamaat is in a separate category altogether because they were the party that collaborated with the killings of 71 and the horrendous killings and genocidal killings of 71. And that is why there was this latent and a very, very passionate desire within the people of Bangladesh that they must be called to it.
I understand that. But let me take this question, a similar question to you, Mr. Karlekar. Is the Awami League's secularism merely a field position, a tactical political position, or are they socially also secular? Because there have been instances of several Awami League workers attacking Hindu households, and there are people who say that the amount of property seized from Hindus is more with Awami Leaguers than with BNP. You see, and Jamaat, of course, doesn't seize property. They are in the ideological business.
You see, Jamaat also seizes property, incidentally. But the problem here is, in many cases, Awami League and Hindu property, there has been a basis on the basis of individual grabbing by antisocial elements, which has been given a political label. That is one. Second, Awami League is one party which has given Hindus back their Enemy Properties Act, under which Hindu properties were confiscated after the 65 war. Awami League has repealed it, and Awami League is restored.
So you are saying Awami League is secular?
Yes.
Totally secular?
No
socially, politically,
no party
is
totally secular. Even in this country, Indian National Congress or so-called secular parties
can be totally secular.
Bangladesh, it is a party that professes secularism, but it may have elements here and there who are not secular.
All right.
But the party's ideology is secular.
Okay. Pinak, let me ask you about the BNP-Jamaat relationship. You know, the more this violence continues, I mean, they have a history of now fighting together in the streets, bringing life to a standstill. Will the relationship between BNP and Jamaat become stronger after this, or will it become weaker? So, and what sense does it make after all this for Awami League to say that BNP must cut its links with Jamaat, when actually you have created conditions which would allow them to forge closer bonds?
This will depend on how far they can carry on with this agitation. Some leaders of the BNP have gone on record saying that when they were asked that poor people and people on the streets are getting killed, etc., they just dismissed it by saying this is all collateral damage.
This is the vice chairman of BNP.
Yes, I think he has said that. And another honorable member of the BNP has said that we will ensure that the country degenerates into civil war. Now, this is the kind of statements coming out of the BNP.
Okay. No, let me ask you something related to this, which is that is the way of making Bangladesh secular through banning Jamaat and Shibir and sort of boycotting these people completely, putting them in jail, hanging the war criminals, or is it through social reform? I mean, madrasa reform, stopping Arab money from coming in, to promote a brand of Islam which is alien to Bangladesh. Bangladeshi Islam is Sufi Islam, very inclusive Islam, there is song, dance, music, and you want to bring in an Islam that's written in stone, which says no music, no dancing, hijab, Wahhabism of a particular kind.
You see, I think that the answer to this, the key example of what Bangladesh wants to be, was epitomized in the Shahbag Square demonstrations of last year, when thousands and thousands of youth came out who were never born in 71, but in a peaceful way. They were peaceful, they were non-violent, they wanted a secular democratic Bangladesh. I think that factor scared the BNP and the Jamaat so much that they thought that their future is finished, because unless, how would they get back the Islamist high ground? How would they get back, the BNP? Obviously, they saw Gana Jagran Manch voting with Awami League. So I think the violence and that feeling of trying to force an Islamist agenda onto Bangladesh began from that point. Actually, the constitutional amendment for CTG was made 2.5 years ago. So why should it now be something that brings people on the streets? But BNP and Jamaat now, they need each other. BNP because they have no cadre, only Jamaat has cadre. Jamaat needs BNP as the political front on which they latch on and get into political power. So they are both forcing their political agenda onto Bangladesh by this action that they have taken. But I think if you see what Bangladesh really wants, I agree with you that madrasa reform is very important. They do have already, Sheikh Hasina has started that in Bangladesh. Banning parties is not the answer, but in this case, Jamaat has not been banned as a social organization.
It's been deregistered.
They've only been as a political party, they've not still a social
we're going to discuss this
yeah.
further, but we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing the emerging political situation in Bangladesh after the general election. Ambassador Pinak Chakravarthy, what is the likely impact of the ongoing strikes on the economy of Bangladesh? It used to be a vibrant economy. This year it's expected to grow at 7%, which is almost double of the growth rate of the Indian economy. But if these strikes continue, stoppages continue, do you think the economy is threatened, or do you think politics will continue to be disturbed and economy will keep working as it does?
Actually, Bangladesh is one of the, I think, excellent examples where they have dysfunctional politics, but the economy tends to grow at a trot, as you have yourself mentioned. But I think if the violence continues and people are not allowed to get onto the streets, go to work, it will have an effect on and particularly the RMG sector, where a lot of women workers are there. Now, if violence is on the streets, women tend to naturally will stay away, and that will certainly reduce their exports. Okay,
Mr. Karlekar, what will be the impact of this election outcome on India's interests in Bangladesh?
Well, Sheikh Hasina has been a friend of India's and stood by India thick and thin. So it's important for India that Sheikh Hasina remains in power. And India must do in its own interest whatever it can to help Sheikh Hasina.
But what if I were to turn it on its head and say that people of Bangladesh are friendly with India, and India must do whatever it can to make the people of Bangladesh happy rather than a particular individual?
You are assuming that the people of Bangladesh do not want Army League. That's a huge assumption, because Army League came with a huge majority.
Some of them may not want.
Sure.
After all, her support base is only about 35–37%.
No, but don't forget that 30% of Bangladeshis, mainly supporters of mainly Islamists and others, have never been friends of India. In fact, 30%.
Then shouldn't we win them over?
No,
they're not going to go away.
No. These, I don't think we can ever win them over, because they were also against the national liberation movement of Bangladesh. If you remember the Razakars, the Al-Badr, the Al-Shams, they didn't come from thin air, they came from the soil of Bangladesh. And these are the people who are centered around Razakars, Al-Badr, Al-Shams, who are all spawns of the Jamaat.
Okay, is that the reason, Ambassador Sikri, why India has indirectly endorsed the election while the US, UK, Canada and Commonwealth have been disappointed with this non-inclusiveness?
No, I think here this is a very important point you have raised, because I think India has made a very good statement on the election results, because India has always stayed away from interfering. They always
That's not the impression you get in Dhaka. They think that India is backing Awami League and that it is against BNP.
You see, India wants a stable, prosperous, democratic and secular Bangladesh. And it is, I think, the feeling of the people of Bangladesh also, this is the best for them, as illustrated by the young people, what they want. Now, obviously, there may be, and there is a political party like the Awami League, whose agenda is that, to have a democratic, secular, stable Bangladesh. So, maybe those ideology, the ideas match, but to say that because of that we are favoring one person or one party, that's not correct.
So tomorrow, hypothetically tomorrow, if the young people come out in Shahbag Square again and say we want an inclusive election and this election was a sham and this is not representative, would India change its position?
India has always been calling for dialogue, and even now the dialogue is very important. The dialogue and reconciliation process has to go on. But at the same time, I'll draw attention to the second part of your question where you spoke about the US, UK and so on. I think their attitude to say that this election, because of 30%, there are many elections in UK and USA where the voting percentage is possibly less.
Yeah, but 18 parties have not participated. 2 of them significant, rest of them not so significant.
Yeah, that may be so, but one of them was not allowed to participate for different reasons, and the BNP chose not to participate. In the end, after they accepted, okay, we know CDG can't be changed because of constitutional amendment, as long as Sheikh Hasina is there, we won't participate. To make your agenda for one person is neither credible nor democratic. And actually to talk about the CTG system which was there for just 2 elections is also not very credible.
Caretaker government.
But I think that the Western countries, the Saudi Arabian government has been opposing the war crime trial, Turkey has been opposing the war crime trial. This combined with the USA and the UK showing a great preference for the BNP's point of view, made it seem as though these countries were not interested in the political stability of Bangladesh, but really serving their own agendas. You had the British and the American ambassadors doing a kind of shuttle diplomacy between political parties. They were going to meet various leaders.
Why weren't we doing shuttle diplomacy to push our agenda? If the Americans and the British were so active, why weren't we doing shuttle diplomacy to get BNP and Awami League to talk and have an inclusive election and have a stable Bangladesh?
Fortunately, Indian foreign policy doesn't operate like that. We would have certainly sent messages across to both parties. In fact, if you remember, Begum Khalida Zia was an honored visitor in Delhi, and we have reached out to both parties. Now, the problem is there, not here. And I think they have to work out their differences and the reconciliation.
As the largest neighbor of Bangladesh, is it not our duty to help them, steer them and facilitate?
I'm sure we are willing to help them and facilitate, provided they are willing to help themselves. Okay. I think that is the main point here.
Okay, Mr. Karlekar, do you see a greater Islamic radicalization taking place in Bangladesh now? Or do you think because secular people have been elected, the society will now become secular and democratic?
Bangladesh society has been by and large secular, minus a 30% chunk which I have just now said, which opposed the liberation struggle. So the secular
BNP did not oppose the liberation struggle. It was founded by a freedom fighter.
Yes, but the freedom fighter also started the Islamization.
It was founded by a freedom fighter.
But the freedom fighter.
Many freedom fighters are still in BNP.
But the freedom fighter, there are many questions about the freedom fighter. Ziaur Rahman was the person who was behind the killing of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Ziaur Rahman was the person who started the Islamization of Bangladesh.
But there are many freedom fighters, people who have lost limbs, who are office bearers of BNP.
But they are slowly leaving the Bangladesh. They are slowly leaving the BNP. Colonel Oli Ahmad is out. Badru Joha is out. And there is now serious
Shamsher Mobin Chaudhary is vice chairman.
Shamsher Mobin Chaudhary
Bikram was awarded to him.
We know what kind of freedom fighter he was.
And here we are saying that this is the party of Islamists.
Shamsher Mobin Chaudhary, we know what kind of freedom fighter he was. He never fought on the...
No, it's a party which was formed by Ziaur Rahman, by those people who had become, who were no longer close to Sheikh Mujib. So he was wanting always to be what the Awami League was not. That was his one point.
That's legitimate in a democracy.
But it was Zia who invited Ghulam Azam back into Bangladesh in 1978.
Yeah, but I don't like painting democratic parties black in the manner that
unfortunately,
some of us are trying to do.
If you see the period from 2001 and 2006, and you would, when Khalida Zia was Prime Minister for the
my last question to you, Pinak. Do you see anti-India feelings growing in Bangladesh because a large chunk of people have not exercised their mandate, and they may think, rightly or wrongly, that indirectly this election and the party in power had India's support?
I don't think anybody in Bangladesh is going to hold India responsible for whatever has happened there.
Not even partially?
They will hold the 2 ladies responsible for not having come to an agreement to have a free and fair election.
India was not a factor in these elections.
I don't think India was a factor, and I agree.
All right, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for analyzing the situation in Bangladesh, and let's hope Bangladesh is a great friend of India, and I hope it stabilizes. And once there's stability, inclusive government there, we'll have you again in the studios and we'll be discussing this. The growth of Bangladesh once again. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting issue. Till then, goodbye.